The following featured presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Hello, Collectopolis, and welcome to another show. Today is a special episode. We are going to be talking to Mike from Props to History. We have some very interesting news we want to share with you later on. But first off, I would like to introduce you to this guy, Michael Corrie, who runs Props to History. I found him on TikTok, and his show is, for someone like me, absolutely riveting. I found it to be a really quick version of a combination of two things: the movies that made us, and Mythbusters. Two things I love. It's the thing about this that, and there's other shows that have tried to do it. I'm not going to use names, but what's great about it is that not only is there a really cool factor of these movie props, but there's a collector's edge, there's a historical edge, there is a how-to edge. There's all this stuff all bundled into this, and it's amazing that he captures it in a TikTok, and he has bigger plans, folks. So I would like to introduce everybody to Mike Corrie. How you doing?
I'm quite well. Oh, hello. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you. Well, I didn't actually come to the show. I'm still in Indiana.
I know you're in a much cooler room than we are right now. As we can see behind you, there's a lot of cool stuff behind.
Probably literally and figuratively, because it is properly cold here in Indiana right now.
Woo, yes, I think I saw that on the news today. You guys are getting a dose of that.
It's not pleasant. But you know what? I'm going to move to Chicago where it's colder.
My kind of town.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go to Canada at this point.
Yeah. Just
So tell us about Props to History, man. Take our audience through it.
Well, props to history on TikTok, and it's also on YouTube and Instagram, every social media platform that I can, it's on there. It started out as me trying to tell the story of props and how they connect to real world history. It started with the Book of the Dead, which is right there behind me, from 1999's The Mummy. The Book of the Dead was a real thing in ancient Egypt and whatnot. I had been doing this sharing my work on Instagram and Facebook and a little bit on YouTube. And a friend of mine at my former employer said, hey, you should try TikTok. And in my mind, that was an app for teenagers. And I am not a teenager. It didn't belong there, but eventually I did. And the very first video I did was about the Book of the Dead. And it went viral. I think it had like 6 million views in the first day that it was on.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, people are interested in this stuff. So I've been a film and particularly prop and special effects historian, an amateur historian, for probably 10 or 15 years. And I've been a prop maker and a model maker for about 30 years. I actually do work in the industry. I just recently finished up a whole bunch of work for Magnum PI Reboot Season 4. And then also the Paramount film, I don't know if I can say the title of it, but a Paramount film here recently that doesn't come out until summer. But I am an actual active prop maker, and this started as a hobby and has now become the weirdest profession on the planet, where I tell people the history of movie props, how they're made, and more importantly, who made them. Because the people that make props and do special effects, they're unknown for the most part. And their stories, I feel, are just as compelling as writers, as directors, as actors.
And on the right story, you also know where they reside.
I do. If they exist, right now it's almost a completely full 2 terabyte hard drive that has a series of Excel spreadsheets of what prop and where it is. And I've been collecting that information for years. So people often comment, you have really good memory. No, I'm just a really good record keeper.
I was one of the people who thought it was a memory. I was like, wow, man, he's awesome. He knows right where that is.
You know, it's great that you get to do this kind of stuff, because I picture somebody coming to your house, just to hang out for birthday or for some sort of social event. And I feel like you do this just while you have people over, he's like, hey, there's a really interesting story about this piece over here. And then you just.
It's funny you say that, because I actually don't. Most of the people I socialize with, they have no interest in the industry beyond just movies and going to see them. I'm not friends, like personal friends where I live, with a whole lot of people that are in the industry or interested in prop making.
Wow,
because I live
that's
in Indiana,
incredible.
There's no film industry. So it's not really had a chance to
You're the film industry.
You're like, yeah, you're the pocket right there, right?
There's a fairly strong independent film industry here.
Okay.
But that's hit and miss. So,
yeah.
And I've only been actively doing this in the public eye for just now a year. Like, it just hit 1 year. So I'm still meeting people. I'm still making those connections with folks. I'm still learning all that. And I've made enormous amounts of connections in LA, and Austin, Atlanta, up in Canada, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, all of the Vancouver, all where films are made. But when you live in an area where there isn't that, it's hard to make connections with people like that will come to your house. So, yeah, it's not.
I guess I'm just a little. What is it? I got a bit of a blind side because I grew up in California, and it's always been around. Even if you don't necessarily live straight in LA, even in the surrounding areas, so much of the production has to go out into kind of some more rural areas and everything. But it's a very, very tight-knit group.
My dad was military, so I grew up on military bases all over the country. And when I was very young, we lived at March Air Force Base in California. And the first time I ever saw a movie-related object, it was the full-size Firefox. Because those scenes of the Firefox with Clint Eastwood, the jet, they made a full-size one that could taxi on its own. It was at March Air Force Base. And I distinctly remember asking my dad why there was a Russian jet on the field. And it was because they were filming a movie.
Ernie, are you familiar with that film?
No, I'm not. I'm familiar with the prop.
As soon as you said that, I was like, he has no idea.
I'm familiar with the prop as it is, but I've never seen that movie or anything like that.
It's typical Cold War era Clint Eastwood film. But they made a full-size version of this jet that could taxi under its own power, and it was built around a radio tower. And when it was done, they bulldozed it into the ground. So,
well, that's okay. So that's on the Excel spreadsheet. That's where you have it.
It's there. It's there.
Like, I was watching the Keaton Batman last night, and that helicopter at the end that Joker is yelling out of, I go, oh, that's the basis of Blue Thunder.
Yep. It's probably the same helicopter.
It's the same undercopter. I know, because I was obsessed with that film. I built the copter. I read about it. Oh, it's French. Interesting.
I mean, literally the same airframe.
Oh, probably.
Wow, they just painted over it.
They just stripped all the front stuff off of it because
they just reused the airframe. They'll just probably rented it from the same helicopter company, and then just reuse the same airframe.
Wow,
that's kind of how that stuff goes.
It's sad when things like that happen, but I get it from a utility standpoint. You just got to use what you got to use, but you destroy so much when you do things like that. Like back in the day with animation, early on films, to get a cell, it cost a lot to keep using these clear cells. So there was literally a department for washing the cells off, and then taking them over, drying them off, and having them reused. So it's like nowadays, like Kevin has some cells behind him from Akira. Yeah. But that's not something you can get from early cartoons or anything like that, because of how they were just treated as, ends to a means.
Yeah, and you'd actually, it probably would hurt you, probably physically, to know how much stuff was just discarded or outright destroyed. And because before 1970, really, nobody cared about movie props. They were just a thing that you used to make a movie, and then you discarded it.
Right.
At the end of the filming of the first Star Wars, Episode 4, they put everything in storage. And because they didn't know how the movie was going to do. It was a low budget film.
Right.
And the studio decided they didn't want to pay for it anymore. So they told them to throw it all away. They let the crew go pull some pieces out. The people that were at the storage facility got to keep some pieces, but the rest of it was destroyed. And my favorite story of all Star Wars props starts out from that day. One of the guys that worked there really liked the Death Star model. So he took it home to his mom's house in Missouri. She didn't know what to do with it, so she turned it into a planter out front of her antique store where it sat for 20 years before it was purchased by a guy who owned a honky tonk, who then took it to his honky tonk and it got used as a trash can because the laser disc part of it was gone.
Yeah.
It disappeared. So by the time the current owner, Gus Lopez, got it, it had been used as a trash can for 15 years before being used as a planter in Missouri. And it's now fully restored and preserved.
That's amazing.
But it only, I love the story of it because the only reason the sole Death Star model survived was because it got used as a trash can in a honky tonk in Missouri.
Wow.
And a planter, apparently. Wow, that's crazy. You know, it reminds me of a lot of like stories that they have for like a lot of old video games that we've probably already played, like Mortal Kombat. The way that it was made was they used live action, you know, people.
Yeah.
But one specific character, Goro, was animated using a little prop. You know, he's this little figure
Stop
that's
motion.
about this big.
Yep.
And then, you know, in the behind the scenes, you see it and it's a wireframe and everything. But if you ask for that from Ed Boon, he's gone on record for saying, like, I don't know where that thing went. We made it and then we kind of just lost track of things.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind. He's like, Ed Boon, the creator, doesn't even know where it is. It just went so.
It probably got
these
swept into a trash can.
into a Death Star.
Or something my kid'll like this here.
And that's what happens with so much stuff after, at least it did at one time, because they just didn't know what to do with it. Nobody had space for it. I mean, 1970, the MGM auction, the legendary MGM 1970 auction came about because MGM needed the room. And they're like, let's, instead of throw this stuff away, let's auction it off and see if anybody cares. And they auctioned off enormous amounts of stuff from The Wizard of Oz, from every film MGM had ever made.
Wow.
And there's so many crazy stories that come about because of the MGM auction. Like the original Time Machine from the Time Machine, the full-size one, was auctioned off that day. And just, I own all the catalogs. It's something like 2,000 different pieces or 3,000 pieces, something like that were auctioned off that day or over those days. And one of them was what was thought to be the only pair of ruby slippers. But what nobody knew at the time was that the guy they hired to catalog everything found 4 pairs and kept the others for himself. And then, but nobody cared. You gotta understand, nobody cared about.
No, I know it's incredible that people are like, oh, this is nothing. It's
because
a pair
of how
shoes
coveted they are
off.
now.
It's fine.
They're very coveted.
And now there's one pair that's for sale for $6.1 million for a pair of shoes.
Jaja Hamas.
Yeah, indeed, Jaja Hamas. Nice Fifth Element reference.
Speaking of references,
so
why don't you walk us through a couple of cool props that you have handy there?
Okay. Well, just right over my shoulder here. So I don't really hunt down originals because originals are far too valuable. They're too expensive. And I'm a prop maker, so I can just make whatever I want. And I wanted a Tron helmet. So I made one. But a big part of my hobby is making them from the original components.
Right.
Because it's part of tracking them down as far as history goes and learning the history behind them. And this is the exact type of helmet that was used for Tron. It's a Cooper hockey helmet, just a regular Cooper hockey helmet.
Show me the top. That's Flynn's helmet. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's Flynn's helmet. But it's all just tape. And this was how they filmed it, because they actually filmed it in black and white. And then they went through and added the color over top of it, each cell hand drawn. And interestingly, it's one of the first movies to use CGI, but not where you think. They actually used the CGI as a frame-by-frame overlay. Right. And they got denied a nomination for Best Special Effects because CGI was considered too easy at the time. So
too easy.
Yeah.
And sadly, and unfortunately, sadly, hand drawing animation over these like cells wasn't considered. Like the effect that they achieved was truly unworldly at the time, but for some reason that didn't count, just because it was the way it was done.
And it was actually the first movie of its type to ever be filmed the way it was, and also the last.
Right.
Because as it turns out,
Right.
it was this brutally difficult, like overly expensive process.
Well, it
And
was
the
cell
movie-
animation, wasn't it? They had to
Yeah.
shoot each one of
They
those.
had to shoot the film and then overlay everything with cell animation. And by the time they were done, they had something like 8 or 9 55-foot trailers full of film from the movie. And they just were like, this is too expensive. We're never doing this again. And it was a flop financially. So they've never got done again, and they didn't need to. The technology advanced faster, so they didn't need to. And as another example of a prop that I made using the original material from season 2, I believe it's episode 1 of Mandalorian, when they have the crate bomb.
Look at that.
That's the detonator. And when I first watched that episode, I recognized it immediately. This is actually from the 90s, a German army audio alarm. They would hook up power down here, and there was a sensor here. And if you walked in front of the sensor, it would set off alarms. So it was used to just like protect whatever asset they wanted to protect. And that's what they built it from, with some extra parts put on and a light switch and a little switch right here. But that's what they built it from. And on the same token, the explosive itself,
oh wow!
Look at that.
Yeah, is actually a mortar storage tube. It's used by militaries all over the world to store mortar rounds.
And then would they put some greeblies on it?
Yeah, they just put greeblies on it and painted it up, and they made a ton of them. It was a really cheap way to make a whole lot of what looked like bombs for the film.
Legit. Looks legit.
And it's making stuff from original parts. Like I said, it tells me the story of how it was built.
Sure.
The processes that they went through to make them. And
the
further you go back, the harder this becomes, because back in the days like of Star Wars, they had access to literal tons of World War II era equipment, because there was just piles of it left over after the war. Surplus everywhere. And you could get whole pallets of it for a song, which is why, what is it? Obi-Wan's lightsaber is made from parts from a Gloucester Meteor jet engine.
Right.
You can't find those parts anymore, which is why making stuff from original parts becomes harder and harder the further back you go. And an example is Leia's helmet from.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
So what is that made from?
So underneath, they made a custom fiberglass ring to go around. It's often referred to as the donut.
Okay.
And then a custom top that was quilted. But underneath all of that is a World War II ANH-15 flight helmet. It's a cloth flight helmet from the Second World War. And that's an original. And I know that some people will be angry because they'll say you ruined an artifact. They made millions of these things.
Right.
And there's still hundreds of thousands of them in circulation. And when someone says that it's rare, I often go on eBay and see how many I can find. Generally, you can find about 20 of them for sale on eBay. That's not rare.
Right. Wow. Wow.
I've been a collector.
That's the kind of story that I love to hear, because it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of trying to make something look cool, and you're obviously getting a prop, and specifically Star Wars. You're getting something for an army that's trying to scrape together anything they can. But then you're also talking about the era that it was built, where you have this incredible surplus of all this World War II stuff. And you're looking at the prop master, somebody kind of in your shoes, and be like, what can I get really cheap that kind of looks cool?
Well, and right? the one little backstory about the costume design for Star Wars is that most of the costumes were I can never remember the fellow's name, but most of the costumes were designed by a gentleman whose background was in military history. He had done all of the costuming for the movie Zulu, for the Battle at Rorke's Drift. He was extremely well versed in military uniform. So he designed them from the perspective of them being practical, or at least semi-practical. So that's why he went with the looks that he did for the Rebels and for the Empire. He based them off of real world military equipment in a lot of cases. Obviously, in some cases, like Vader, he was based on samurais. And the stormtroopers were based on, I have no idea what they were based on, but they all have that aesthetic, and they keep to it because the costume designer's background in military history.
Right.
And the further back you go in film, you start to realize that Star Wars really was kind of the first to really kind of create its own world like that, using what was left over in the real world. Like before that, you have science fiction properties that are creating things from scratch, and they look beautiful. But Star Wars pulled in a lot of real world things that if you paid attention, you'd recognize it, but it didn't take you out of the story. So it all worked together rather well.
That's such a like a crazy thing to think of, how we're pulling from our own history to make a history that doesn't exist anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you really think about it, that's kind of the crazy a crazy thought to have. Speaking of your collection, is there a unique item that you have? It's not necessarily the most expensive thing that you could have, but something that's fairly unique.
I do, as a matter of fact. About 6 months ago, I had the opportunity to go and meet a lot of folks in the industry in Atlanta. And in the process of meeting all these folks, I made a connection online with a gentleman named Thomas. I don't know if he wants me to use his actual name on here, but he was a Muppeteer on Muppets from Space. And I wanted to meet him because he's been a Muppeteer. I'd never met a Muppeteer before. And when I went to meet him, he says, I have something for you. And it's quite fragile and it needs to be restored. But he gave me this, and it is believed to be the last surviving Gonzo Nose from Muppets.
Whoa!
Whoa!
You can see that. You can see it's quite cracked. It's because of latex rubber.
Yeah,
has a lot of water in it, and over time that water dries out, and you get stretching and cracking, and it needs to be.
I thought they were foam. I thought when I was watching them as a kid, I thought that was foam.
Well, so when I say that this is Gonzo's Nose, at the end of the film, there's a concert, and there's a lot of fans of Gonzo, and they're wearing these masks. You can see the string.
Right.
It's just his nose. They're made out of latex rubber.
Yeah.
And this is believed to be the last of those that survive, because I've never seen another. And he gave me that, but he also, I need to turn the camera to show you. That right there is the Hensonville News Observer that Kermit is holding in the opening scene of the film.
Oh, wow.
And any pieces from Jim Henson period Muppets are extremely rare and
beloved.
Yeah. And because I was given this by the Muppeteer, and the Muppeteer is a personal friend of mine, that is my most cherished piece in my collection.
Wow.
Because I have the story to it. It was given to me as a gift by a friend.
Yeah.
And it's just for that, I absolutely love it. But that is my most unique piece in my collection.
Now, just to get a little bit more out of that piece in particular, you said you wanted to restore it.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of this is a big part of the community for props and everything, because a lot of this stuff that gets discarded, like you're saying, is made from really temporary material, because it needs to be done quickly, get it onto the thing. It just needs to look good enough to be on, the set, and then, like you said, in the trash. What goes into restoring something like that prop? Because you said it has a lot of water in it and eventually dries out.
So in its current condition, the only thing that can really be done to it is to have more latex rubber put on it, on the back of it, to back it up, to stabilize it. And then all of those missing pieces that have crumbled away get replaced with new latex rubber, and then it's painted to match without losing any of the original finish. And there's only a couple people in the world that do it. And one of them is a friend of mine, Tom Spina, up in New York, who also owns Regal Robot, who makes a whole lot of maquettes for Disney. And his team up there in New York are absolutely magnificent. And I'm hoping to be able to go up there and film with them not too long from now. So to show how they go into the process of restoring this, because I want to take this with me and record the process of it being restored, so that people can see how a piece that's so deteriorated can be saved.
Do you see? This is why I love this show. This is what I'm talking about. You were at the beginning, you're all, what the heck is he talking about? This is why. So now
let's.
are we? I want to do you have any the things like that you just either had to purchase or decided to purchase? Maybe 2 or 3 things that.
Oh, like stuff that I
that you didn't want to build. So
I have a particular obsession with one prop that, well, actually I have a particular obsession with a lot of props, but one that I absolutely love the insanity of its backstory, and that's the Maltese Falcon.
Wow.
Yes.
I absolutely love the movie, the book, and the prop itself and the story behind it, because it's connected to the Black Dahlia murder, Playboy, Night Court,
classic Hollywood.
Yeah, it's the connections with this thing are ridiculous, and it is the original. What's considered to be the original is made out of 45 pounds of lead, and is one of the most valuable props in history at $4.1 million, and it's owned by Steve Wynn in Las Vegas. But have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the scene with Margot Robbie where she's like touches the nose of a Maltese Falcon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a real Maltese Falcon. That's the promotional photography model resin that was used for all the promotional shots for the film. And it was purchased by Leonardo DiCaprio for like $300,000. So they actually put a real Maltese Falcon. If you see the famous publicity photo of Humphrey Bogart holding it like this,
right?
That's that same Falcon.
And it's made from what again?
Wow. That's the resin model, okay. Right?
Okay.
So it's much lighter.
Oh yeah, far lighter. It's only a couple of pounds. As far as like other props, so occasionally I will buy screen use stuff.
Oh,
it happens. I'll buy screen use stuff. And the first John Wick film came out, and there was an auction on Prop Store, who I work with a lot. In fact, they sponsor my podcast. They give me access to all kinds of stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have. And I spent an embarrassingly large amount of money to buy a single coin, and that's one of the screen use coins.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Yeah,
that's fantastic. How many were printed?
So several thousand were made. And
well, there's a whole slew of them in one scene, so I knew that. But
the stacks are just a solid piece. They're one piece. They're not individual coins in a lot of those cases. But this was from a lot. I think they had something like 600 of them in individual lots, and this was one of them that I paid an obscene amount of money for from the first film. And it's one of my screen. I have a lot of screen use stuff, but I don't seek it out. Usually I just make it. It's like the blue sky from Breaking Bad. Actual production made, like used on the set in the first season, blue sky. This was given to me by a friend of mine. But I have a couple of little baggies of this. But sometimes I will buy stuff because it's just sometimes I can't make it. And one of the things I can't make, I have to turn the camera around. So I'm just gonna pan around. You can see all the rest of the stuff that's in here. And I have a really long table. Sorry about that. But I have a 6-foot tall Vigo from Ghostbusters 2.
Whoa!
Which is of course right in front of the Pee-wee bike. But the Pee-wee bike was made by a good friend of mine, Greg Nowling. And also he made the Star Trek chair as well, the captain's chair. But I have always wanted a large scale painting of Vigo. Now, this is not a full scale painting. This is only 6 feet tall. The original was 10 feet tall.
Yes.
And it's actually at the Lucasfilm archives. So one of these days I'll get out there to see that. If Lucasfilm will ever let me in the door, we'll see if that ever happens. But things like that, I'll buy that because I can't make that. I don't have a printer big enough to make that. So I will go to professional printers to have that stuff made. But for the most part, most everything in here, I'd say probably 70% of the stuff in here is stuff I've made.
Wow, that's awesome. Amazing. That coin kind of blew me away because it's one of those things that they make. It's one of those things that's a small, very small piece in those 3 films, but it's almost like an icon that it's just an icon you can fit in your pocket, and you know exactly what it is when you see it. That's what's great about it.
I'm going to step out of shot real quick. Hold on. Speaking of small things that you consider insignificant, you don't really think about as far as props go, these are very small and they're very, very hard to get on screen. So I'm going to try here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Those are
those the pills?
These were not used on screen. These were made for production, but never actually used.
Put it in front of your face because it keeps trying to focus on. There we go.
No, he got it.
Okay,
oh
there we go.
my gosh, that's amazing. Look at that.
Now, wait a minute. Though I just thought they got some pharmacy, some pills or something, I mean, like, because they're just gel caps, right?
Some of them were. Some of them are made of resin. They had a bunch of different versions of them. Because
I would think the medicine ones would be attuned to like temperature and everything. I don't know if you'd want to use that.
Yeah, if you had gel caps and constantly having them in an actor's hand, when he's holding like this, they would melt. So
yeah,
in fact, I
think
one of these.
That's so cool.
As it turns out, one of these is a gel cap because it's melting.
There you go.
It's melting.
Oh my gosh, that's such a trip. I didn't think they would use. I totally for sure thought they would not use gel caps with all the heat that it has to go through, the lights, the holding them in your hand, all that stuff.
And like Keanu Reeves puts one in his mouth. He doesn't swallow it because they do an immediate cut.
Right.
And then he takes it out of his mouth and then they reset the shot. But a lot of them are made out of resin. Some are made out of, some of them were sugar pills. Some of them were just little gel caps with colored water in them, etc. They made a bunch of different ones for it, and that set is one of them that they made for production but never actually used. So
that's again, you hit the nail on the head right there. It's so small,
right?
Such a small thing. If you were cruising through your house or anything, it was sitting there on the thing. It'd be so unassuming. Same with that coin. But once you actually see what it is, in context, you get blown away by something so small, right?
And it's amazing that something so small can be so significant to a story,
right?
Because that's what sets the story in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And they're tiny. They're little pills.
But the significance of those coins in the John Wick universe is because you see he has like a stack of like 10 or 20 in the first one. You're like, wow, that's an impressive amount of kills or something. Because each one is a completion of a job. And then I forget if it's 2 or 3. You see someone with just gobs of them and you're like, wow,
As far as, and this is something most people are unaware of, that when you film a coin up close for any shot, whatever it is, you don't realize how big that coin actually is. So this is the John Wick coin. This coin is Two-Face's coin from Batman Returns. You see the size? Yes. This is the up-close filming model. When he flips the coin in the air and they're filming it as it flips through the air, this is the coin they would use. More accurately, this is a casting of the coin that they would use. This came from the original molds. This particular one's made out of pewter.
Okay.
But
that's crazy cool, man.
It makes sense if you're trying to get something in frame and you had to zoom in and just hope that thing stays in focus at a small size. It's a lot easier at large size. You have a better chance of getting.
The Lord of the Rings, the ring. Most of the shots of the ring that you see in an actor's hand, it's this big, but in reality,
oh my gosh,
when they're doing close-up shots of it, it's this big.
That's huge,
right? And this is just a 3D printed model that I built to demonstrate that. This is purely for educational purposes that I made this thing, to show people just how big these things can get for filming and to show how those effects are done.
One of my favorite props that doesn't exist anymore, because I have a feeling it's just gone, but maybe you have some insight.
Let's find out.
In the movie Osmosis Jones, it's very because they're dealing with a lot of cartoons / live action stuff. They do this insane zoom in one scene, and it's a zit. And according to the behind the scenes that I saw, the thing, this zit was like they zoom in as far as they can, and then all of a sudden it's like a doorway that they filmed, and they just made this whole thing to spew out. And I'm thinking like that existed somewhere for a while. It's like, this is Eddie Murphy's pimple head. You know what I mean?
And in all reality, because the movie's well over 20 years old now, that latex piece that they built has probably deteriorated quite significantly, because it's weird, like massive props like that tend to not be very collectible because most people don't have the space for them. Right. So like the filming model for the Nostromo from 1979's Alien.
Oh yeah. It's
11 feet long.
Yep.
And it still exists. It's in the hands of Prop Store. Yep. And I'm hoping to film with it next month. They had it for sale for a long time. It's actually still technically for sale, but nobody wants it because it's so big. When it was given to Bob Burns by the production company, they just gave it to him. It was so big he couldn't put it in his house, so it sat in his front yard for 20 years and deteriorated, as you might imagine.
Wow!
Well, and they've been restoring it, right?
It's fully restored now. The restoration is complete, and I haven't been given access to it yet. I'm hoping to have access to it very soon. But from the photographs I've seen, it's absolutely magnificent. They did an absolutely beautiful restoration on it, and it's gorgeous. I mean, technically, it's pretty ugly because it's the Nostromo.
Right.
But from the perspective of a model maker, which I am, it's absolutely beautiful. So I'm really happy that it was saved.
They ought to put it in the Sci-Fi Museum. That'd be a good place.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen to it, truth be told. Like I said, they have it up for sale. But if at some point, if I have the money, I'm gonna own it. I got into this because of filming models. They were the first thing that drew me to film, and the Nostromo was one of those models. So to have that, I can't have the first model that drew me to it, which was the mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's at the Smithsonian. But if I can get the money together, I'll own the Nostromo.
Wouldn't that be sweet?
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
Well, let's talk about now. Let's switch gears and talk about the big project. Let's talk about what's going on with Props to History. You are currently in a fundraising mode. Walk us through where you see this going.
So shortly after I began doing this and started going out to places like LA and Austin and Atlanta to film with people, a lot of folks in the industry, not just in person, but also through TikTok, they kept telling me I would love to see this as a long form show on a streaming service or on YouTube. And it was just not feasible at the time because filming something like that is obscenely expensive, as I'm finding out. And I decided to pull the trigger, quite frankly, on filming this, what I do on TikTok, the history of films, the history of props, the history of special effects, and the people that do it in a long form format. And I've already filmed 3 episodes. I still have to film another 9 episodes for the first season, which airs March the 1st on YouTube /Props to History. Just type in Props to History. You're going to find it somewhere. And it's all over the place. But I've raised about half the money I need to complete it. And if you go to my TikTok page, you can find the link for my GoFundMe. Or if you go to my Instagram, Props to History, there's essentially a link tree there that has the link for my GoFundMe in it as well as my YouTube channel and all my other social media channels, etc. But I want to see this as a long form show. I want to make this as a long form series because I want to tell these stories of the people that work behind the scenes that quite literally make movie magic. They physically make movie magic. And it's something I've been obsessed with since I was a kid. And I know a lot of other people are interested in it. And I've been surprised at how easily folks in the industry want to tell their story. And it's been great. The reception to it has been wonderful. And I've been able to talk with people that I grew up with as idols, as people I looked up to, are now willing to sit down and chat with me about their history, about their career, and how they did things. And that, to me, is it's kind of a dream come true, but it's also a very painful dream to try and get it done. Which is because I don't have sponsorship for this at all. So I'm doing it entirely self-funded and through crowdfunding, which is what the GoFundMe is about.
This is where you come in, folks. Click on. We're going to try to put all those links somewhere down there. We're going to try and give you guidance. Pick your favorite. Go and support this, because I promise you, you will be rewarded. This is excellent content.
Thank you. I like to hope that it is. I've been told by a lot of people that they did not know that they cared about this information until it was presented to them in the correct way. And now I have people that are like, tell me more stories, because all I want to do is hear more stories. So
yes, and that's it. I think the difference is that on some shows that have tried to do this in the past, that they've hired a personality or somebody and they sort of gloss over. It's like a 5,000 foot view, even though they think it's very detailed. It's not as detailed as somebody like I would want, or I'm finding out most people would want. One, and two, I think what's really underneath all this is it's being presented by someone that cares about it. And it comes through even in a short TikToks they're not long, but the fact that you can tell in the quality, the way the information is presented and the type of information we're getting, it's not the information you would get by somebody that's just doing I work for this company making a 5,000 foot pass at this subject and moving on. I'm into this.
Oh yeah, I absolutely adore this subject material. Yeah. It is very much my passion, and I like to teach people, and I love to tell stories, and not a little bit, I love the sound of my own voice, so I'm going to keep talking about it as long as possible.
That's why we're all here, really.
We definitely get that. Yeah. I love the fact that you have run into most individuals who love to tell their stories about working in the industry, seeing how it all got put together, because honestly, a lot of the times you hear just the stuff that you've been telling us today. The fact that a prop that valuable just sat in somebody's front lawn. The fact that Kevin has told this story a lot. Like his lightsaber that was built for him was made out of like old photo parts. Like it's something so iconic that's made from just,
from junk,
found
material that some prop master decided I was under the gun and I was sticking things on here, and it had to go. Something about somebody telling you a story about in the trenches and being in the trenches of this kind of thing, getting things done on time, and then realizing that thing that they so sometimes haphazardly put together became a really important part of a cinematic trilogy or like universe.
My favorite tale of haphazard builds is from Aliens 1986. The Sulaco, the ship that they arrive on the planet in. You only ever see one side of it because because the other side is nothing but tape and twist ties and rubber bands holding it together. It still survives, actually. It's actually in the collection of Bob Burns as well.
Does it have its original twist ties?
Probably. As a matter of fact, it probably does. Bob Burns is one of those dream interviews I would love to have. Unfortunately, his health is not very good, but he started out as an editor for, I believe, CBS, and he was throwing these horror shows during Halloween. And because he knew everybody in the industry, he was asking for props to put on display and use for his horror shows that he'd throw. And because no one cared about props at the time, they would just give him stuff. And when Alien came out, he asked the studio, "Hey, can I borrow some of this stuff?" And they said, "No, you can have it." And they essentially gave him a truckload of stuff. They gave him the full scale, like the massive scale derelict ship, the alien vessel, the Nostromo, the suits, the space suits, a lot of the uniforms, a lot of the xenomorphs, the alien costumes themselves, the face huggers, you name it, they gave it to him, and he still has it. And a good friend of mine. A good friend of mine who makes hyper accurate spacesuits from Alien, the big, massive hockey pad suits that everybody knows.
Yeah.
He got the chance to go meet Bob after he had made one of these suits. We'd actually been hired to restore what was thought to be the only surviving one that hung in the Hard Rock Cafe. And he went to Bob because Bob knew everything about these things. He was known to be the expert. Sure. And he sat down with Bob. He said, "I have the only surviving suit." And Bob goes, "No, you don't. Open that closet." And right behind him, he opened the closet, and there's the helmet that the face hugger went through. Kane's entire stunt suit, Ripley's entire suit, her white suit that she was wearing, both of the child suits, because Ridley Scott put his kids in those suits. I've stood next to one of those child suits that he still has. He just finished restoring it for Bob. And this stacks of this. He even had all of the swatches they used to match fabric throughout the film. And it was just insane. He has the only surviving Gumby and Pokey claymation model.
Wow.
That's
very impressive, because claymation does not survive whatsoever. It dries out, the wires underneath break. Like,
and if you'll remember, I mentioned the 1970 Mgm auction.
Right.
And that the time machine was in that. Well, Bob Burns went to that auction with $1,000 in his pocket to buy the time machine. He got outbid. Well, 1980, I believe in 1983, he went into a junk shop in Burbank, and back in the back corner was the time machine. Missing a few parts, but the original time machine for $1,000. He bought it. And he owned it.
How did he get there? See,
just
that's
happen chance, right? Just happened to...
he was in the right place, right time, which is pretty much the story of Bob's life, as it turns out. And he had it restored, and he mentioned, I think somebody mentioned, oh, now all you need is the little model one from the movie, because they had a miniature version of it.
Sure.
It was demonstrated, and apparently he made like a phone call, and then a few weeks later he owned that too. So
wow.
Yeah,
a couple of years, but that time machine has been popping up every so often, because I remember more recently it was on The Big Bang Theory that they bought an original time machine, and I always wonder I wonder if that's like that was
a replica that was built by a prop maker. I want to say he's in Van Nuys that built that. But that was a replica. It's not the original. The original has not left Bob's house since he got it. And they only made the one for the film. So
really, they only made one?
Yeah, it was such the time machine
back
was a
in those days.
Film.
Yeah,
and they only had the budget for the one, because there was a lot of brass work and metal turn metal in that thing. It's a very detailed piece of machinery.
Yeah.
And it's but now
I'm always I guess I'm always just used to the hey, this one's the dummy car, this one's the close-up car, this one's the hero car, that's the one that gets driven on, and then there's the one that we're going to explode later, so it doesn't really we're going to look at it from far away, that could, but only
that one doesn't matter, we're blowing it up anyway. Well, the flying wing from Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, they only built one of those, and it had actual aircraft engines in it, and it had brakes,
right,
and it was a fully functional, not flyable, but functional aircraft. And when they were done with it, they blew it up.
Right.
So that is
we all saw that
scene of it being destroyed.
Yeah, that is it.
Wow, I didn't know that. I figured they just built a fake one and filled it with gasoline and what.
And you got to cross your fingers. You got enough cameras rolling, and you got the coverage you need. So, right.
Yep. Now I have the unfortunateness that my cord is too far away and my phone is dying now.
Okay, so real quick, can you tease who you've already interviewed, and maybe with this funding, who you want to? So far I've already interviewed Fawn Davis of Fawnco Studios, Earl Hayes Press, who makes most of the paper goods for film. I'm actually got the chance to interview Senior, the fellow who owned it before the current owner. He started there back in the 60s with the original Earl Hayes. He had the opportunity to work. He had stories to tell about, like Jack Warner and Bill Bailey, like old Hollywood stuff, Good stuff.
Excuse me. The folks at Global Effects, who make all the spacesuits for film, or most of the spacesuits for film.
Awesome.
I'm hoping with this funding that I'll be able to do my interviews at the Sony archives and have a look through all of the Sony archives, including an original Johnny 5 and all the stuff from Ghostbusters. Ben Eady, who was the master on Ghostbusters Afterlife 2, who's now a personal friend of mine. Stuff with Prop Store, stuff with ISS Props, the largest prop auction house in the world, or excuse me, prop house in the world. The artists behind Vigo from Ghostbusters 2, the legend that is Max Cervantes, possibly the legend that is Phil Tippett, I've been reaching back and I'm going back and forth with Tippett Studios about that. And the list goes on. It's quite long at this stage of the number of people that have reached out that want to be a part of it. Stan Winston's Creature Shop, Jim Henson's Creature Shop. But I have to raise the funding to be able to afford to go out there and do it and pay the cinematographers and the editors, all things I don't know how to do. But that's
why we got to get them funding, people, because we want to hear all these stories. We want to preserve this history.
Yes, please.
Special place in my heart for Jim Henson for sure. I grew up watching those films, and oh my gosh, the history that is, because it's puppeteer is probably disintegrating as we speak. So we got to get this on record. You know what I mean?
And I just want to be obvious here, but whatever y'all guys can afford, $1. $10, $100, $1,000, whatever you got laying around.
And anybody that does donate to it, no matter the dollar amount, your name goes in the credits of the series. It's the least I can do for supporting me, and hopefully we can make this happen, because it's something I believe in, and I believe a lot of other people want to see.
Definitely.
Well,
Definitely.
I really hope we get this going, man, because this is super exciting to me, and it's my kind of TV. So all right then, Michael, I just want to say thank you, and I hope that we have more conversations in the future.
Well, that's our show, everybody, and I want to say thank you again to Michael and Props to History for coming on the show. And remember, we're always looking for more viewers, so please share the show out to your collector friends. Visit our Facebook, like us, and tell your friends about it. We would love to hear your feedback. You can comment on the show's episode, ask questions, or even direct message us.
Or tweet us at SkywalkingPod and use the hashtag Collectopolis. We are part of the Skywalking Network,
Skynet,
where you can also find other great shows like the Neverland Clubhouse, Star Wars Ologies, Talking Apes, Totally Tell Me Everything, the Max FX Podcast, Resilient Squadron, and the flagship show, Skywalking Through Neverland.
And look for more shows on the Skywalking Network YouTube channel, like Classics, Marvel, Star Wars Comics, and Today in Star Wars History, your daily Star Wars history lesson.
Until next time, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Ernie, and we will see you next time right here on
Collectopolis. Collect what you love and love what you collect.